Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us for the second key session today. I'm pleased to introduce to you all Sabir Zazai. Sabir is the Chief Executive of the Scottish Refugee Council and has been in that role since 2017. Previously, he was the Chief Exec of Coventry Refugee and Migrant Centre. Sabir arrived in the UK from Afghanistan in 1999. And his work draws from his own experiences and the expertise that he has in community integration, cohesion and refugee rights. He graduated from Coventry University with a Masters in Community Cohesion Management and was awarded an honorary doctorate from University of Glasgow and the Lord Provost Award for Human Rights. He's the Honorary President of City of Sanctuary and Visiting Practice Fellow at the Centre for Trust, Peace and Social Relations at Coventry University. Sabir currently chairs the Asylum Reform Initiative and Together with Refugees movement. And in 2022, he was awarded the Fellowship of the Royal Society of Edinburgh and also received an OBE. So please could you give a welcome to Sabir Zazai.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Just to reassure you that I didn't have a chat with Richard at lunch for that very grand introduction, so thank you, that was very generous. I'm delighted that I'm here with you today at this conference, and it made me think back to my days and my own personal connection with library services, and it took me straight back to Coventry, or sent me back to Coventry, and I think my first interaction with libraries was as an asylum seeker, as a person who was asked to survive on £5 a day, and I had to stay in asylum accommodation. I was not allowed to work, and there was not much to do, so I'll go and just sit in the library. I didn't read English or understand English, but I'll pick up the biggest book and just go through it. I remember very kind ladies and the staff members in the library would often come and say hi and say, how are you? And the only thing I could say back was, how are you? So it's like, but I think that kindness and compassion, beyond the books that you give out to people and receive back again, there was something that I felt in that surrounding, that warmth, that understanding, and also the fact that I was treated like a person. There was no language, but there was that kindness, the language of kindness, I could feel it. So from that time, that interaction and connection that I had with library services to today, my connection with library services today is this, the borrow box, to download a story and play it for my son who's 6. But it's beyond that as well, so when I go for my walks and runs, I listen to some books too. So quite a change, but I still always remember library services and libraries in general as places of sanctuary. So I think whether you know it or not, I think you're the welcoming face of our society. And I think you need to take that pride and admiration in the excellent work that you're doing. I know these are challenging times where library services might be affected by the economic pressures, the cuts and others. But I think you should remember that what you do is valuable, and what you do is not something that would be easily replaced by machines, computers and others. That love and compassion comes from the person, and that chat, that welcome is really, really important. So I thought I'd reflect on that initially in my opening remarks, but I want to tell you about refugees, about people who seek protection in our society in these really challenging times. And I'll aim to reflect on three key elements in my talk. Firstly, home, and by home I mean community, not literally that home, but the community that people need once they're fleeing a conflict. And secondly, safety, why people need safety. And thirdly, integration and what role you play in that journey of integration. Because it's not always about people arriving in search of safety. Once people are safe, there is that complex journey of finding your feet, developing that sense of belonging and being part of a society. And that can take a long time for people. I arrived in the back of a lorry. I arrived with only 7 years of formal education. And like some might say, well, 7 years of formal education and that journey, and even I sometimes feel, has that really happened? But what I arrived with, maybe it wasn't education, maybe it wasn't qualifications, but I arrived with a dream. I arrived with my hopes and aspirations. And it was those things that really enabled me, plus the welcome and hospitality of the local people and communities that helped me to restore my confidence and dignity and be an active member of our society today. So people we work with at Scottish Refugee Council need safety, they need protection. And oftentimes they're faced with lots of really regressive, complex, inhumane policies. So people seeking asylum need a home, they need a community. Sadly, the UK government policies currently is denying people not just the home and the community, but the safety that I received and many others received before me in this society. So basically the policy is currently of no welcome and no protection. So the illegal migration bill and the attack on people's right to seek protection and the language, the inhumane language, just does not only make it difficult for other people seeking protection, but it's making the rest of us, people like me and many others that are now part of our society, feel very unwelcomed and very much frustrated as well. So what we do see in our work is that there is a sort of like, there is a story being told in a way which is not right. So the focus on small boats arrivals and others. There's something bigger than just small boats behind the scene. So currently there is quite a lot of people who are put in institutional accommodation. So contrary to my story where I arrived and I was accommodated in the community and I could have access to what you offer and many others offer, this current approach to protection of asylum seekers is very different. People are put away in institutional forms of accommodation. So in October 2019, there were 1,500 people put in institutional forms of accommodation. Can somebody guess now how many are in institutional accommodation now? 55,000 people. So 55,000 people are put in institutional accommodation away from the community. These are either ex-hotels, army barracks, or ships and other things, and barges and others that have been considered too. People in this form of accommodation don't have access to they don't have recourse to public funds. But what I do see personally, I think they don't have access to public love and compassion as well. They're put away. And they have to survive on £1.30 a day. So £1.30 is going to the people in this form of institutional accommodation. Just imagine how much is going to the private providers providing these barges and institutional accommodation. £3 billion. £3 billion. I think I would ask, imagine that £3 billion spent in our communities, in our housing sector, in our libraries, in our other services. We'd be in a different place. We'd be able to cope with the pressure of people arriving. Sadly, that £3 billion, none of us will see it. That will be just gone to the private companies. And that is the kind of like gross dysfunctional distribution of public money. But also that waste as well, because those people in asylum accommodation, they're people like me. They may not have the skills, but they've got dreams. They want to be like us. They want to have a dignified income. They want to be safe. They want to be valued. But this form of approach of asylum protection is putting them at disadvantage. They're put away from our society. And that number is growing. So we now have about 170,000 people stuck in the asylum system. Not that those 170,000 people arrived yesterday. These people arrived over the years, and some of them are in the asylum system for a very long time. On Friday last week, somebody from Afghanistan, that's where I come from, rang me. And I couldn't believe it when I thought he got the number wrong. He said he's in the asylum system for 14 years. I can imagine the amount of money. Let's not look at the money for now, but his well-being, being in a limbo for 14 years. We've lost out on his skills and potential. But at the same time, we've paid money to be cruel to him and keep him in that limbo. That person would have cost the taxpayer millions because of the accommodation and the subsistence and others. So when we want to be cruel, there's no shortage of money. But when we want to create a system that offers people that dignity and protection, then there is, sadly, there's no money. So I think, I don't want to dwell too much on that, but this is the current picture at the moment of how people arriving like I did are being treated. And people ultimately want safety. So, as I just described how the UK system does not offer people that safety, we need to know why people need that protection. And some of you will be saying, why are people coming here? So we live in a world, as we gather in this room, there are over 100 million people forced to flee their homes. We live in a world that is largely at conflict. We never thought that one day there will be conflict in Europe. We thought that's in other countries, it never happens here, but it is happening here. Nobody knew about working remotely from home. COVID, and nobody knew something like that would happen, that we'll have to queue up for our second and third jab. All of a sudden, our lives changed. This is what people are coming from. Their lives are turned upside down. Ukraine, a terrible conflict. And it was enough of a reminder for the likes of the UK how lives could turn upside down for people in a matter of minutes. And why people need protection too. So I think there is that picture, but on the other side is the inequalities as well. We live in a world that is there's so much injustice and inequalities. There are people in some parts of the world that have to survive on $1 a day. Like any one of us, we have families, we have children. If we struggle to feed our children, we'd be going somewhere else. I've got 3 kids. If I struggle to feed them, I'll be finding another way to going somewhere else to feed them. That is human nature. People will come to our shores. Just like the Home Secretary tells you that 100 million people want to come here. No, they don't. A very small number of them will make their way ultimately here. And I think it's fair for us to then treat them with dignity and respect. I know for some, asylum may not be the right option, but even then, we need to look into a dignified return for people, not threatening them with being sent to Rwanda or other places. Sadly, the language around this has undermined our cohesion, because our cohesion and how we live side by side, that is a delicate, fragile flower that needs nurturing, not throwing things at, because you don't know where to stop. Once you start othering people, there's no way of stopping that. So sadly, we've got to this context where we are in a situation where money is being made on the backs of people fleeing conflict, and we need to make sure that people are given the opportunity to rebuild their lives. Because I personally, on my own experience, 23 years ago when I arrived in the UK, life as a person seeking protection is not easy. I come from a large family, but only I made it to the UK. Not everyone wants to cross an international border. Not everyone wants to seek protection. And my father came to visit me, my brother came to visit me, my mother came to visit me. I said, this is your life, that is our life. They went back to Afghanistan with conflict because that's where they have their sense of belonging. It would be a big, big change for them to come here. So a small number that comes here, we don't need to scapegoat them, we need to give them the opportunities. And they will be part of our society as well. And again, I think it's in terms of figures and numbers, which I don't believe in so much because figures do divide us, and it's the powerful stories of people and individuals that happen within your settings and the libraries and the institutions and universities that we need to tell. But 0.2% of the UK population are refugees. It's a small, small number, so we've not been invaded or swamped. A vast majority of people, as I said, seek protection in the nearest countries. So if I give you the example of Syrian refugees, out of the 6.7 million Syrians, of which 4.6 million are internally displaced in Syria. They don't want to go elsewhere, they want to rebuild their lives in Syria. So at a very young age, I became internally displaced in Afghanistan. We ended up in a refugee camp. We lived in that camp for 10 years, counting days, weeks, and months to return back to our home and rebuild it. But it wasn't happening. Until life becomes unbearable, people don't cross international borders. So sadly, what is on the horizon for refugees in the UK is not very good. So there are talks of prison ships across the UK, but they might come to Scotland as well. I'm not suggesting they will, but I think, again, the UK government's and the Home Office's approach is very much to be as tough on people seeking asylum as possible. And coming to the topic of integration now, and integration is important. We want people to be able to feel that sense of belonging, be part of our society. But sadly, the Home Office has got zero interest in integration, because once you put people away from society, integration does not happen in the back of an ex-hotel room in army barracks and barges, and integration happens within the community. For me, it happened within the heart of those communities. And everyday integration happens within your libraries, within post offices and bus stops and others, not in places that are away from our communities. So, and also integration is a two-way process. We want to ensure that people come and learn about our values and our principles and so on. But at the same time, we need to be able to afford them their rights. We cannot expect people to learn our language whilst they're stuck in a barge in Dorset. So that is as clear as it is. So, and also we need to see refugees as from an asset-based approach, not a deficit. We need to see refugees as people who can contribute and take that rights-based approach and collaborate with our neighbours, with others, to create a more humane, effective and efficient asylum system. And we've done it. We've done it for Ukraine. In a response to Ukraine, I know some of you in this room would have hosted Ukrainians or would be welcoming them to your libraries and supporting them for all good reasons, which is very important. That is a great model to learn from. We don't see Ukrainians on small boats because a safe route has been established. How can we reflect that welcome to others as well? Because conflicts do not discriminate, and so shouldn't we. So it's very, very important that we learn from the great things that we're doing. And by putting people away, sadly, that will undermine our cohesion, and we will end up with a part of our community that will be living parallel lives. So finally, I just want to say where we stand as Scottish Refugee Council, Scotland's national refugee agency. So just as I described what is happening to people seeking protection here, I think it's important for us, what we do as an agency is that we highlight and we bear witness for the new legislation that the UK government is pushing through House of Lords at the moment, the illegal migration bill. So under this bill, I know I'm not a lawyer and I'm not expecting all of you to understand what the bill will do. But in simple terms, if a woman from Afghanistan, let's just say, for example, if a woman from Afghanistan who lost her husband whilst fighting for the British Armed Forces in Helmand, with her 2 children, arrived here in Scotland after this bill has been implemented, will not be in a position to tell her you're welcome here and we'll support you. She will be classed as a criminal for arriving here illegally, whilst there's no legal route for her to arrive. There's no resettlement program currently that is functional and accessible for Afghanistan. There's no functional and accessible resettlement program for Sudan, where we know what's happening. So this is the situation where we will be put in a difficult position to deal with the needs of that woman and her 2 children, because the bill will literally deny her the right to seek asylum. So I put in an application for asylum and it was looked at. But this bill will prejudge people's claim for asylum. So before our system looking at this woman's claim and her 2 children, it will just prejudge her and say, well, we're not in a position to offer you protection. So that is not offering people any form of integration or safety or home or community. What we want as Scottish Refugee Council is we want people to thrive, not just survive, and be given safe routes and be allowed family reunification and be invested in. We need that investment in integration. And I think to make that happen, we need to work together collaboratively with libraries, with universities, with many of the great public services. I want to register thanks to all of you for the great work you've been doing in opening your doors to welcome people from all parts of the world, but particularly the response to Ukraine. I work very closely with Councillor Chalmers, who's here, on the response to Ukraine, but also on the response to asylum seekers as well. Your role is pivotal in supporting people, but also offering them that welcome, irrespective of what is happening with the policies, that when you're here and you come to a library in Scotland, that you do receive a warm Scottish welcome. I think that is what we need to maintain, and that is very, very important. And it's not an issue of us and them. There's no us and them. If we look into our own identities and backgrounds, some of us will have connections with people who have come to these islands. We may have friends who are refugees. Our children might have friends that are refugees. So there's no us and them. And the final message I'd say is that when refugees do well, when refugees have their rights, when they feel valued and supported, we all thrive and we all prosper. So refugee rights are our rights. There's no division in there, because if you start drawing lines, then there's many lines to be drawn. But I think it's that message of unity and support. And I'd like to, again, wish you all well in the work that you do. And people are often after a smiley, welcoming face. May you always continue to offer that to people who are new to your communities and to your libraries. So thank you very much.
Sabir does need to leave quickly, but we have got a wee bit of time for a couple of questions if anyone would like to ask anything. Yeah.
Thank you so much for reminding us that libraries are sanctuaries and cultural connections and welcoming places. So you mentioned at the end of your speech that we need further collaborations between institutions like yours, for example, and libraries and other public services. Do you suggest any specific area in which libraries could usefully be more engaged? And I just wanted to mention that I've been doing, that I've been directly involved in not only doing research, but collaborating with NGOs and charities helping refugees. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Very good question. Well, thank you for all the work that you do with NGOs. I think a tangible ask from the libraries would be that there is this concept of libraries of sanctuary. So I used to be involved in City of Sanctuary, and through that we developed these concepts of universities of sanctuary, libraries of sanctuary. I think we carried on. I think there is a pub of sanctuary as well, and the barber of sanctuary, and a few others. But anyway, so I think libraries, could look into that and commit to what could be done to help and support people. I think you're already doing a great job. The issue for people arriving is access to advice and information and signposting, and that is key. And when that vacuum of information is provided, then people don't have access to their rights. So I think libraries, alongside, again, the books, you've got that bridging role in bringing people closer to their rights. You might not be citizen advice bureaus and others, but you do play a pivotal role in bringing people closer to their rights. And I think that's important to maybe renew and look at that and see where, once people present to you, what role do you play? And it may not be just refugees, but I think with the cost of living pressures and others, there's a lot of pressure on our society. And I think, again, I see libraries as much more than giving out books and there is that information aspect, and I think how important that is. And your role in keeping society together and that treating people equally. Thank you.